Training and Education in Islam by Ayatollah Murtuda Mutahhari. Chapter 19, Factors Contributing to Training, Part 4, Work. Our discussion was about the elements that contribute to training. We dealt with some elements or factors, and now we shall continue the discussion. One of the factors, which is very simple but perhaps given less attention, is work. Compared to other factors, if work is not more constructive, at least its role is not less constructive. Man imagines that work is his product or creation, and thus he takes precedence over work. That is, the quality of man takes precedence over the quality of work, and the quality of work depends on the quality of man, and thus training takes precedence over work. But this is not correct. Training takes precedence over work and vice versa. That is, these two are a product as well as the cause of one another. Man is the creator and the fashioner of his work, and at the same time, work and the quality of work is the molder and architect of man's spirituality and quality. Work according to Islam. Idleness is rejected and condemned in Islam, while work is considered something sacred. In religious parlance, whenever there is a desire to announce the sanctity of a thing, it is said that God loves such and such. For example, it is recorded in a tradition that can be found in the book Wasa'ilu Shia, Volume 12, page 13, that, indeed, God loves the professional believer. It is also said, and it is mentioned in Al-Kafi, Volume 5, page 88, that he who works hard for a living is like the one who struggles in the way of God. There is also this famous tradition that can also be found in Al-Kafi, Volume 5, but page 72, that cursed is he who puts his burden on the shoulder of the people. This tradition is recorded in Wasa'ilu Shia and other books, as mentioned. Also, according to another tradition recorded in Biharul Anwar and other books, whenever someone was praised in the presence of the noble messenger, the messenger, peace be with him, and his progeny would ask about his profession. If he was informed that he was jobless, he would say, "He has no more value in my sight." We have many texts in this regard. Just in the booklet Dastan-e-Rastan, it can be understood from the short stories and accounts of the Prophet, the Commander of the Faithful, and other Imams, how sacred work and to have work are according to the leaders of Islam. And this is exactly the opposite view of the Sufis and so-called ascetic men. Sometimes we hold the notion that work is only proper in the event of helplessness and lack of other options. That is, about him who works, we say that he is helpless and needy, and he is forced to work. Basically, what is wrongly considered sacred and success is joblessness. Fortunate are those who have no need to work. Now, whoever is helpless has no option but to work. This is while it is essentially not a question of neediness and self-sufficiency. First of all, to work is a duty. The tradition, "Cursed is he who puts his burden on the shoulders of the people," bespeaks of this. But we will not presently talk about work from this perspective. That work is a social duty and society has a right over man, and whatever a person consumes is a product of others' work. And if we accept the Marxist theory, basically the value of every item depends on the amount of work required to produce it. That is, goods or to be goods are in reality an embodiment of the works done to them. Now, if this theory is totally correct, at least part of the value of whatever a person consumes is still equivalent to the work done to it. The clothes you wear, the food you eat, the shoes you put on, the house in which you live, whatever we can see, we realize that we subsist as a result of the work of others. The book we take and read is a product of others' work. The one who has written it, the one who has produced its paper, the one who has printed it, the one who has bound it. In the society in which he lives in, man is laden with the product of others' work. If he wants to avoid work under whatever pretext, As the Prophet said, his burden is shouldered by others without shouldering even a light burden of others. Well, there is no doubt that it is a duty to go to work, but we talk about work from the perspective of training. Is work a duty only as a result of social helplessness or not? If it is not so, work is still necessary. In other words, if it is not necessary, work is still an essential matter from the perspective of molding an individual. From one perspective, man is a multi-centered being. He has a body. He has the power of imagination. He has an intellect. He has a heart. Work is essential for the human body. It is essential for his power of imagination. It is essential for his intellect or mind. It is also essential for his heart and feelings. That work is essential for the body hardly needs an explanation because it is something very obvious. If the human body does not work, it will get sick. That is, work is a factor for the maintenance of health. There is no need to discuss it. Let us discuss the power of imagination. Work and concentration of the power of imagination. Man has a power, and that is, his power of imagination, which is continuously active. When a person systematically thinks about general issues such that he makes a conclusion from a set of premises, we call this thinking or intellection. But if the human mind haphazardly wants to make a conclusion and discover the logical relationship amongst objects, this is an accidental state. If a person does not take the responsibility of controlling his imagination, this is one of the things that can lead him to corruption. That is, he is in need of concentration of the power of imagination. If the power of imagination is uncontrolled, it will become a source of his moral corruption. The commander of the faithful, peace be with him, said, "If you do not keep the self busy, it will make you busy." There are things, such as an inanimate object, which remain as they are even if they are used or utilized. If I put this ring, which is on my finger, on a shelf or box, nothing will happen to it. But the human being is something else. He must always be busy. That is, he must always be busy and occupied with a certain work. If you do not keep him busy, he will draw you to whatever he likes, and it is at this moment that the door of imagination will be opened for man. He thinks while in bed, he thinks while in the market, he imagines this, he imagines that. It is this imagination that draws man to 1,000 kinds of sins. On the contrary, if a person has work or an occupation, this work or occupation draws him to himself and gives him no chance to engage in illusion or false thinking. Work and prevention of sin. There's a book entitled Self-Help, written by a certain Samuel Smiles. This book is among the good works written about ethics and morality. There is also another book called At the Threshold of Happiness. It is also a good book. Now, I do not remember in which of them it is written that sin, in most cases, is an outburst. It is like a steam boiler, which, if heated and has no specific hole or opening, will finally explode. It is said that sins are mostly explosions. So to speak, man explodes. It means that as man is a living creature, he must interact with nature. In many places in his books, Mohandis Bazargan has stated that man is always interacting with nature in the sense that on one hand, he acquires energy or power, and on the other hand, he wants to consume it. When a person acquires energy or power, be it physical or spiritual, he has to consume it somewhere. So too with the imagination of the human being. Whatever the human body acquires, it must be utilized in some way. In the end, the mouth has to speak, the eyes have to see objects, the ears have to hear sounds, the hands and feet have to move. That is, man cannot afford to regularly acquire energy from nature and then just keep it unconsumed. This non-consumption is like the holeless steam boiler, which is regularly heated and will explode in the end. There are individuals who, on account of a sense of nobility or some other reason, put this energy in a state of inertia, or what the Arabs call a state of utla. That is, in terms of working and consuming reserved energy, their entire being is in a state of suspension, while they themselves are not aware that the energy wants to manifest in one way or another. If it is not allowed to manifest in a correct way, proper or legitimate way, it will manifest in an improper way. In most cases, the rulers will lose their lives. One of the reasons of losing their lives is this state of standstill, or utla, from wholesome work, because sense of nobility dictates that the ruler does not do by himself his personal work. For example, even if he wants to smoke a cigarette, he has no need to indicate to another person to take out and light a cigarette. He does not even have to light his own cigarette. As he wants to put on his shoes, someone would immediately come forward to do it for him. As he wants to wear clothes, someone would immediately come forward to assist him. In sum, others do all the work for him, and he is just sitting idly, such that even doing a very simple and insignificant work is considered contrary to his status and position. Regarding one of the ancient emirs of Khurasan, it is narrated that one day he wore an elegant cloak and a hookah was brought to him. The hookah incidentally fell on the cloak and the cloak caught fire. He believed that it was below his status to put out the fire on his cloak. He just called his attendants. Before coming to his rescue, his cloak and part of his body were already burned. He considered it essentially against his status to put out the fire on his cloak. I even heard that if he ever wanted to blow his nose, somebody else had to place a handkerchief on his nose. The reason why these individuals commit every type of crime and treachery is that social customs do not allow them to spend their energy in the proper way. Women and backbiting. Women were known before for backbiting. Perhaps it became known as a female trait that women are backbiters, while the fact is not like that. There is no difference between man and woman as far as the tendency to backbite is concerned. The reason for this notion was that women, especially the affluent ones, whose household chores were done by attendants, had nothing to do both inside and outside the house. From morning until evening, they only had to sit down and do nothing. They were neither readers nor scholars. Every woman had to find another woman with similar status. What would they do? They had nothing else to do but to backbite, and for them, this was something inevitable. If they would not backbite, they would have really become miserable and wretched. In the monthly meeting, I once narrated a story I read from a newspaper. It was written that in one of the small cities in California in the United States, gambling was so prevalent within families that women became accustomed to it, and it was rampant like a contagious disease in homes. The public complaint was that wives were doing nothing else except gambling. Initially, religious preachers were entrusted with the mission of uprooting this malady, but any malady has a cause. A malady cannot be eradicated unless its cause is eliminated. The preachers began to preach about the evils of gambling and its other worldly consequences, but it had no effect. A new city mayor was elected and promised to cure this malady. He promoted handicrafts like weaving and initiated wholesome handicraft competitions for women with handsome prizes. Women soon stopped gambling and engaged in these activities. The mayor diagnosed the cause and realized that the reason why women engaged in gambling was idleness and their need for amusement. He gave them another occupation so as to be able to eliminate gambling from their midst. That is, in reality, they had experienced an emotional emptiness, which was the cause of this sin. That gentleman realized that he must fill this vacuum in order to eliminate gambling, and unless the former was filled, the latter could not be eliminated. As such, one of the effects of work is prevention of sin. Of course, we do not claim that it is exactly like that, but many sins are as a result of idleness. In the previous session, we talked about mental sin or sin of imagination, saying that sin is not limited to the sin at the stage of action. Sin of the imagination is also a sin. That is, thinking of sin is also a kind of sin. Of course, thinking of sin, so long as it does not reach the stage of action, is technically not a sin in itself. This is contrary, though, to thinking of anything good, even if there is an external impediment to its actual realization. In the sight of God, it is equivalent to the good deed itself. Search for aptitude in choosing a job. Apart from hindering actual outbursts, work prevents satanic thinking, insinuations, and imaginations. Regarding work, therefore, it is said that everyone must choose the work in which he has skill so that his interest is drawn to it. If the work is incompatible with one's skill and interest, he only performs it for the sake of wage or payment, then this has no effect on training, and perhaps it can even corrupt the soul. When a person chooses a job, he must also have the necessary skill. No one is devoid of all human skills and talents, but no one knows from the start which work he is skilled at. Since one does not know that, he looks for a job in which he has no skill, and as a result, he is always irritated. For example, the condition of our students in this national college entrance examination is very abnormal. Every student tries whatever way possible to be exempted from this 2-year conscription and finds his way to the university. Whenever he fills out his enrollment form and questionnaire, his diploma allows him to choose a variety of courses, yet he opts for a glamorous course. In many cases, he chooses a course in which he has no interest at all. That is, he leaves his entire destiny to chance. This person will never succeed in life. In many cases, such a person has no interest in literature at all, yet as a way of precaution, he enrolls in literature or theology course, notwithstanding his pre-university diploma in mathematics. Or initially, he would have failing grades in mathematics, and then shift to literature or theology, in which he has neither talent nor interest. Until the end of his life, he would engage in something in which he has no interest. Most office work is also like that. Of course, it is possible that some employees really love their work. In most instances, however, office work itself is repetitive and not based on initiative. In order not to be marked absent and his salary be deducted, the employee is forced to sit in from his table in spite of intense lack of interest in it. This arbitrarily affects the human mind or soul. One must choose the job which he loves and is interested in, and he must avoid any job in which he has no interest, even if it has a high salary. So regarding work, one must observe the point of doing whatever he is interested in and requires his initiative. Work and examining the self. It can be deduced from the above point that one of the salient features of work is self-examination. One of the things which a person must examine before anything else is his self. Prior to this examination, one does not know his skills and talents. By doing so, he will discover them. Unless a person works, he cannot find out if he has talent at a certain activity or not. By working, he can discover himself, and self-discovery is the best of discoveries. If a person tries to do a type of work and finds out that he has no talent in it, he chooses another type of work and still another type of work until he finds the work he has talent at and is interested in. Once he discovers it, his interest in it will tremendously develop, and he will not be concerned about how much he earns from it. It is at that time that masterpieces can be made, for masterpieces are motivated by love and not money or income. For money, one can work but cannot produce a masterpiece. One must really have love for his work. Hence, one of the salient features of work is that through it, man can examine and discover his self. Work and logical thinking. We have said that logical thinking means that man draws a conclusion from premises that exist in creation or nature. If one thinks in that he always draws a conclusion through a way set by nature, this thinking is logical. But if a person wants to obtain his objectives, ideals, and goals through a way which is against nature, or through which an objective can only be achieved by accident, then this thinking is not logical. For example, it is possible for a person to become rich by finding a hidden treasure. He goes to the desert, or he buys a piece of land on which he wants to erect a building. He digs the soil and finds the treasure, or he becomes rich through lottery. If a person wants to get money through these ways, which are not logical and planned, his thinking is not logical. But if he wants to earn money or get income through a logical way, his thinking is logical. For instance, if he wants to earn his income through menial labor, it is true that it is a slow way of earning, but it is a logical one. If in a given day I decide to carry a shovel on my shoulder and work until sunset, it is logical to that extent that I will earn 15 tumans at the end of the day. Once a person engages in work, his thinking is logical. That is, in work he can feel the relationship between cause and effect, and since he can feel it, his way of thinking is consistent with the laws of the universe, and other than this is nothing but satanic, imaginary, and fantasy ideas. This is why I have said that work affects man's intellect or thinking. Apart from the fact that one acquires experience and learning by working, and that work is the wellspring of knowledge in the sense that man acquires his knowledge through experience and work, or in short, apart from the fact that work is the source of knowledge, work also corrects, trains, systemizes, and strengthens the human intellect or thinking. The impact of work upon one's emotions. Also, work has an impact on the human emotions. It is related to what is called the heart in the Qur'an, and to which tenderness, humility, hard-heartedness, luminosity, and turbidity are attributed. We say that so-and-so is tender-hearted, or so-and-so is hard-hearted, or we say, my heart became dark, or my heart was illuminated. It refers to that center of man's being which we call the heart. One of the work's effect is that it generates humility or meekness in one's heart. In other words, it prevents hardening of the heart. Idleness brings about hard-heartedness, while the least benefit of work for the human heart is the prevention of its hardening. In sum, apart from being a product of one's thinking, spirit, imagination, heart, and body, work at the same time molds his imagination, intellect or thinking, and heart. In short, it molds and trains the human being. Work and sense of self-esteem. Yet another benefit of work is the preservation of self-esteem, honor, or independence, for which there are many expressions. For example, abiru in Farsi. One's feeling will be hurt when his self-esteem, or abiru, is undermined and despised. As the fact of work, especially if it is coupled with initiative, on account of cutting off his need for others, man has self-esteem before others. That is, he does not feel despised anymore. In this regard, there are two quatrains attributed to the commander of the faithful, Imam Ali, peace be with him, recorded in the poetry collection, Divan, attributed to him. One of them is as follows: To carry stones from mountaintops is more pleasant and easier for me than to shoulder the burden of being indebted to others. They say to me, there is ignominy in work and occupation. And I say to them, ignominy is to possess nothing and to ask from others. Another quatrain is as follows: If you want to live like a free man, work like a slave. Permanently sever your desire for anybody's wealth. Do not say, this job humiliates me, because to ask from people is most humiliating. When you are independent from others, you are nobler than all people, whatever you might do. Abu Ali Sina and the Scavenger. As you have heard, Abu Ali Sina spent many years in politics and became the vizier of many succeeding kings. The following account is among the things for which succeeding scholars took issue with him, saying that this man spent most of his time in such work while he could have been more beneficial and productive in view of his extraordinary talents. One day, Abu Ali Sina, with such pomp and display, attendants and slaves behooving a vizier, was passing by a certain place. He met a scavenger busy in his typical work, emptying a lavatory. Abu Ali, who was also known for his strong sense of hearing, and there are even fictitious stories in this regard. The scavenger was whispering a poem to himself which Abu Ali heard. I respect you, O self, for making life easy for your world's heart. Abu Ali laughed as this man was scavenging, yet he was reminding himself of his favor to it. I respect you for making life easy for you. He pulled the rein of his riding horse and approached the man and said, It is true that you really respect yourself. There is nothing better than the fact that you have chosen such a noble profession. The scavenger recognized from his stature and outward appearance that he was the vizier. He said, Eating bread from a mean job is better than being indebted to a ruler. In other words, he said, This job I am doing is better than yours. Abu Ali perspired out of shame and left. This in itself is a separate subject and a need for man. To live independently and not to be indebted to someone is the most valuable thing for someone who has a sense of humanity, and this is impossible to do so, except by relying on oneself. The Noble Messenger's Admonition. There is a story in Usul al-Kafi, where you can find it in volume 2, page 139, under the section of Qina'a, which I have mentioned in Dastan-i-Rastan. One of the companions of the noble messenger was very poor, such that he could hardly look for his daily bread. One day, after reaching a dead end, after consulting with his family, he decided to go to the Holy Prophet upon the suggestion of his wife to reveal his situation and ask him for financial assistance. He came out of his house with this intention, yet before making his request, the following words fell upon his ears. We help whoever demands us for assistance, but God preserves the needs of those who feel free from want. He returned home without uttering a single word. He found himself again facing the awful silhouette of poverty overshadowing his dwelling place. The next day he determinedly rejoined the assembly of the Holy Prophet with the same intention. He heard the same words from the Holy Prophet. We help whoever demands us for assistance, but God preserves the needs of those who feel free from want. He returned home once again without putting forward his request. For the third time he saw himself overwhelmed in the jungle of poverty, debility, misery, and helplessness. He decided to go to the assembly of the Holy Prophet in order to put forward his intention. Once again, the lips of the Prophet moved, and the same words were repeated, invigorating the heart and giving the certainty to the spirit. This time, by hearing those words, the man felt more confidence and perceived that he had found the key to his problem. He went out with more assured steps, thinking, I will never ask for someone's help. I will rely on God and take an advantage of the energy and capability which exist in my own self, and I will pray to Him to make me succeed in what I will undertake to do and make me rich. He thought what kind of job would be suitable for him to look for. In such circumstances, he decided to go to the desert, gather some firewood, and sell them. He went and borrowed an axe, and then he left for the desert. By gathering firewood and selling it, he realized the result of his own toil. He continued working hard for the following days until he managed to buy an axe, a beast of burden, and other means of work with the money he earned. He continued working till he gained capital and his own servants. One day the Prophet met him, and while having a smile on his lips, he said, We help whoever demands us for assistance, but God preserves the needs of those who feel free from want. Work according to Nasir Khusru. In a poem by Nasir Khusru, he wants to say that the excellence or virtue of everyone can be detected from his face. Then, he also has an elegant poem in condemning idleness and profligacy. Work according to prominent figures. I read in Behdasht-e Ravani magazine that the famous scientist Pasteur has said that the mental hygiene of man is the laboratory and library. It means that mental hygiene depends on work, and an idle person will automatically get sick. I have written here that this is not limited to the laboratory and library. All works which can profoundly and positively draw one's interest and attention are good. In the same magazine, Voltaire is reported to have said, Whenever I sense that the pain and suffering of illness wants to put an end to me, I seek refuge in work. Work is the best cure to my inner pains. In the same book, Self-Help by Samuel Smiles, I remember that he wrote that after religion, there is no school built for human training better than the school of work. Benjamin Franklin is reported to have said, "The bride of life is called work. If you want to be the groom of this bride, then your child shall be named Success." Pascal also has said, "The root of all mental and moral corruption is idleness. Any country that wants to uproot this serious social stigma must encourage the people to work so as for them to attain profound tranquility of the mind of which only a limited number are aware." And lastly, Socrates has also said, "Work is the capital of success and good fortune." وَصَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَعَلَى آلِهِ الطَّاهِرِينَ. And may God's salutations be upon Muhammad and his pure progeny. End of chapter 19. End of Training and Education in Islam by Ayatollah Murtuda Mutahhari.